Hello and welcome. You're watching Coronavirus Facts versus Myths. I'm Rishika Barua. The big worrying story that we're tracking for you today. There were 3 children with black fungus who had to go through surgery to remove an eye each in Mumbai. The 3 children were aged 4, 6 and 14 years. They were operated upon at 2 hospitals in Mumbai. The first 2 children were not even diabetic, but the 14-year-old child is diabetic. Now, a 4th child, a 16-year-old, has become diabetic after recovering from COVID, and a part of her stomach was found to be infected with black fungus. Now, remember, when you talk about black fungus, experts have repeatedly said that early detection of black fungus is key. So what is it that you need to watch out for? We have Dr. Jaisal Sheth, the senior consultant pediatrician at the Fortis Hospital in Mumbai. Dr. Jaisal is actually one of the doctors who's been treating one of these patients. Doctor, thanks very much for being with us on NDTV, and I think this is a very worrying story. So, at the very outset, can you tell us how rare or common is this, and therefore how much of a cause of concern it is at this moment, the cases of black fungus in children?
Thank you for inviting me. I would like to assure that, we had just 2 cases. So when we try to compare with the adult cases, I think our numbers in the children are very less. And the second thing is that both of them were diabetic. So even before the COVID pandemic started, it was very well known to have the incidence of the mucormycosis in children with the diabetes, as well as other risk factors like any condition which will lower their immunity, like chemotherapy, cancers, solid organ transplants, or any other infections. So as of now, it is not very appropriate to say, at least from the cases whom we have managed, that this COVID has increased the mucormycosis. And apart from that, we can also say that the risk factors which we see in adults, like more prevalence of diabetes, other risk factors, comorbidities, obesity, and the use of the steroid because they are so sick. I don't think that we have had issues of the medicines in the children. Comorbidities are not there. So based on the 2 cases, I would not be, trying to create any kind of the fear among the parents. But yes, we have to be watchful. We have to be watchful. If the parents are seeing any kind of the black crust or blackening, in the children, with or without COVID, before or after COVID, they need to get back to the pediatrician.
That's very important, and that was actually going to be my second question to you, that you need to watch out for symptoms with or without COVID. Whether your child has a history of COVID or not, these are symptoms that you need to watch out for. But before I come to you about the symptoms, doctor, I think it's very important that you say that there's no cause of concern at the moment, because these are very rare cases that have been reported. The proportion of children infected with black fungus is minuscule compared to the adult population. So we don't want to be alarmist, but at the same time, these cases have happened, and therefore it's imperative to report and ask questions about it. But talking about symptoms, what are the symptoms that parents need to be watchful? And what is the age group most susceptible?
There is basically there is nothing like age. It is more like the comorbidities, and one of them is children. Also, there are group of the children who are diabetic. So I think in adult and children, the risk factors are saying diabetes should be well controlled. People who are having uncontrolled diabetes are more prone. So that is one. Second thing is good hygiene, because it grows in the moisture. So reuse of the mask, because most of the people do reuse the mask, so ensure that the masks are dry. Then the third thing is that if someone is actually on the steroid, either adult or a child, they need to be watchful. So any kind of the symptoms which shows any kind of the blackening, because mucor can infect any part of the body. It can infect eyes, lungs, intestines, skin. It can be invasive. So and it is pandemic. So see, on one side, people have fear to go to the hospitals because we all think that we will get more exposure while being among other sick patients. And other side, so we want to identify early. And this needs to be balanced. So better that if you are concerned as a parent for any reason, you see any black crust anywhere in the body, better to be back to your doctor to ensure that this is not infection.
Right. So whether or not your child has a history of COVID, if the child is taking steroids for any reason, you need to be watchful and careful. I think that's important advice. But doctor, if I can just ask you specifically about these cases that you've dealt with, where the eyes of children have had to be removed because of black fungus. Can you tell us a little more about these particular cases?
See, it's difficult to distract individual cases just from the emotional safety point of those children. Yes. But at the same time, what I would say is the mucor has an inclination to invade the vessels. So, mucor can create the thrombosis, and once the vessels are thrombosed, that part or that organ of the body will not get the blood supply, and it will start dying, which will reflect as a blackening of that tissue because it is necrosed. So, if it happens inside the body, then one is not able to see that, because if they see mucormycosis of the lungs, the parents would not appreciate. At the same time, if it is a head and neck mucormycosis, if it involves eye or the sinuses, and if we have to do any kind of the surgery to debride that necrosed part, then it is very saddening actually. But ultimately, mucor in general, whether it is of head and neck or if it is of any other part of the body, it is a very rapidly developing infection. Yes. And that's why early treatment is important, and doctor does try to remove all the necrosed parts from the body so that it doesn't spread further, while giving the injectable medicine to clear it off.
Yes, and obviously saving lives is priority, so it's also important while we're reporting on this story to say that yes, these children unfortunately did go ahead and lose their eyes as a result of black fungus, but they've made a recovery in the sense that their lives were saved. And I think that's also important to note here. There's another concerning story of a 16-year-old who developed diabetes after COVID. Is this something which is commonly being seen, doctor?
Yeah, if you ask many endocrinologists, adult clinicians, and even among the pediatricians and ICU specialists, we can certainly say that we are overall seeing a rise in the prevalence, new incidence of the diabetes.
Right.
So we have seen more number of the patients presently to us with diabetic ketoacidosis, which is a severe complication of the diabetes, when the sugars are so uncontrolled and so high that body develops decompensation, brain also gets involved, and they come to us. And this incidence has certainly increased, and especially in the post-COVID time. And there are some speculations about some of the strains, being more inclination for the pancreas, damaging some of the pancreatic cells and making the children as well as adults, inclining to develop the new diabetes. There are some more factors, like I think like adults now, children, because of the pandemic and lack of the exercise, they are saying rise in the lifestyle disorders in the children also.
Yes. So, and I want to, because you talk about lifestyle disorders in children, I want to ask you specifically linking this to COVID. Should children who have recovered from COVID be tested for diabetes?
We are, I would say, we are not going to generalize it, because everything which we try to generalize as a cost, we have to use the resources, infrastructure, inconvenience, and exposure to other things. So I would say that in a very simple way, watch for it, be careful. As a pediatrician also, we are also very open-minded and careful to watch and try to link some of the things to COVID or the lifestyle. But the simple answer is, if you are concerned, get back to your pediatrician. That will be as simple as that. Then pediatrician will guide you whether to worry or not to worry for weight gain or any other comorbidities or new symptoms in the children.
So if you have any cause of concern, any new symptoms, then you must absolutely consult with your doctor and let the doctors then take the best possible decision. So it's important to note here that mucormycosis is not yet a cause of concern when it comes to children, but these cases have been reported, and it's always good to be vigilant. Thank you so much, doctor, for joining us on the broadcast. Right, so let's shift our focus now to the other interesting development. Now remember, India has increased the duration between 2 doses of Covishield. It was 6 to 8 weeks, it's now 12 to 6 weeks. Now when India did this, it cited real life evidences, particularly from the UK. But after that, data that has been released by the Public Health England in UK, that data has indicated that the protection that is offered by 1 dose of the vaccine is only 33% against the Delta variant 3 weeks after the first dose. 2 doses, on the other hand, of AstraZeneca, for instance, offered 60% efficacy against the Delta variant, and 2 doses of Pfizer offered 88% efficacy against the Delta variant. Should India reconsider reducing the gap? This has been a big cause of a debate, a big question that many people are asking. We have Dr. Karthik Cherabudi, infectious disease specialist and epidemiologist from the University of Florida, with us on the broadcast to answer these key questions. India's cases are dipping, doctor, but we've been warned of a third wave. In which case, given this new data on vaccine efficacy that we're putting out on our screens, is it better to have fewer people vaccinated with 2 doses or more people vaccinated with 1 dose? How do these numbers play out?
Yes, I think it's the concern also is that we're not just seeing very high risk older individuals only having infection. I think we are definitely seeing more younger, relatively healthy people also get infection. And when we look at the numbers, I just don't think there are enough doses to get through that entire population with 2 doses performed. I think there's a balance. I think personally, a shorter duration would be a factor. It doesn't have to be 6 weeks, but probably in between might be a reasonable number to look at to balance out both factors.
Right. But there is better protection against hospitalization caused by Delta variant if you are given 2 doses. Should that be a priority for India as we prepare for the onset and possibility of a third wave?
It should. I think we have to get 2 doses and get everyone fully vaccinated. I think that's the #1 priority. How we do that is really the debate, and I agree. There's no great answer. I think leaning towards getting people the second dose, excuse me, leaning towards getting people the second dose is the best way to get people the protection they need. How do we balance people who've already gotten infected? With this wave, I think we can hold off. I think the government is doing a reasonable job in asking them to wait 90 days. I think that's one step to letting other people get the protection they need. Prioritizing areas of spread and where we've seen the most infections, especially in areas where ventilation is not possible and where we have more people closeted together, especially in the cities and urban areas, I think has to be a priority.
Right.
And probably a phased in way where you prioritize the highest risk individuals to get to the second dose makes sense.
Okay, so you're saying that we should be reducing the gap or looking to reduce the gap at least for the priority group or high risk individuals.
Yes, and this is where I think this is a conversation that needs to happen nationally rather than at a state level, and with all these factors taken into play. And how do we balance this? There's clearly a difference that we are seeing between 2 doses and 1 dose, the amount of protection it offers. So I agree. We need to shorten the interval. We need to get as many people to 2 doses as possible. And how we do this is where the real interest is, but prioritizing risk groups makes sense.
Okay, so that's an important point that Dr. Cherraputti is actually making, because he's essentially saying that even if we have a shortage of doses and we can't give 2 doses quickly enough to everybody, so shortening the gap for everyone's not an option, at least India should look to shortening the gap for the high-risk priority groups in the country to give them better protection against the Delta variant. Thanks very much, Dr. Karthik Cherraputti, for joining us. Welcome back to our special campaign, Vaccinate India, in partnership with Google. Now we're discussing questions that you may be Googling about the COVID-19 vaccine, and we have an expert doctor to answer those questions for you. Professor Dr. K.K. Sethi, Padma Shri awardee and Chairman Managing Director, Delhi Heart and Lung Institute, is with us. Thanks so much, Dr. Sethi, for being with us. You know, people are still concerned about the safety of the COVID-19 vaccine. We have now 3 vaccines available in India. What more can you tell our viewers about vaccine safety?
I would like to strongly emphasize that one should not be worried about the safety of the vaccines at all. It's been proven beyond doubt that vaccines are not only effective, they are extremely safe. And all of them have been tested in sufficient number of individuals to certify that they are absolutely safe. So there should be no hesitancy in accepting the vaccine at all.
Right, but people are concerned because vaccines take many years to develop. These vaccines comparatively were developed in a very short span of time.
Yes, that is correct. But then the situation demanded that extra effort be put at a very, very rapid pace to develop a vaccine for such a severe pandemic, which was severely life-threatening. And the scientists across the world actually probably worked round the clock. So the actual number of hours which were put in were not very less than what would have been done in 15 years, except for the fact that the trials were a little fast-tracked.
Right.
And that was the need of the hour. And sufficient evidence is available both from the lab as well as from the clinical experience by now across the world that the vaccines are very good and they must be accepted by the public at large.
Right. I think the other question now emerging is on vaccine effectiveness. How effective are the COVID-19 vaccines in preventing you from contracting COVID? And I ask this question because new emerging variants have raised questions over vaccine efficacy.
Yes, that's true. Now, the initial data that was available with us with different vaccines data put together showed us that the vaccines are anything between 70 to 95% effective. Subsequently, the results have even been better because with the experience with healthcare workers who are at the maximum risk of contracting disease, it has been found with the United States studies as well as the experience in India very recently with the two vaccines that are available with us, that even in these very high-risk individuals, vaccines are 95% effective in preventing disease.
Right.
And those who are unfortunate to contract disease, 99.5% of them would not get severe disease, and the risk of getting into the ICU is very, very low, and getting into critical illness is extremely low. So that actually proves the safety and efficacy of the vaccine in the real world.
Right. So what you're essentially saying, if I understand you correctly, Dr. Sethi, is that you can potentially still get infected after you've got the vaccine, but you definitely have better protection from a severe disease. Is that correct?
Yes. You can get infected, the chances of which are very, very low. But if you do get infected, you will by and large get very mild disease, which will be self-limiting and you don't get any complications.
Right.
And the chances of dying from the disease are extremely low if you have had your vaccination.
Okay. The other question then, is about single dose versus 2 doses of the vaccine. Many people now debating, when you should be getting the second dose of the vaccine. What would you advise?
You see, some protection is given even by the single dose, and that is variable from vaccine to vaccine depending upon, which vaccine we are using. And as far as the second dose is concerned, there was some data which was published and has also been, studied very extensively by our own people in ICMR and at the government level, that if you delay the second dose by a few more weeks, the immune response that you get out of it is much stronger than you normally get with a single dose.
Right.
So considering all this, the government then decided to, increase the interval between 2 doses with certain vaccines, which is based on good scientific evidence.
Right.
But even the single dose also provides very significant amount of protection in a large number of people.
Right. The question then is, why is the dosing gap different? This is also a question that a lot of people have asked. For Covaxin, the dosing gap is different. For Covishield, the dosing gap is different. Can you explain to our viewers why?
Yes. With Covaxin, the data that is available is a 4 weeks dosing gap between the 2 doses. And we do not have the data in which the vaccine has been, given later and what is the immune response that is generated by it. And that is the reason, because whatever we practice in medicine, the first requirement for us as clinicians is to practice evidence-based medicine.
Right.
So even if Covaxin shows that a later administration of the dose is as strong, at this time, we are not following that rule because unless there is evidence, we will not be able to recommend that.
All right. So whatever recommendations there are, of course, based and founded in science. Thanks so much, Dr. Sethi, for joining us with those important clarifications.
Thank you.